Well, it's Oscar season again, that time of year when Hollywood honors those amazing films that bravely went on playing in theaters, even though no one was sitting there except Nicole Kidman, desperately trying to move her face. For myself, I couldn't look forward to the award ceremony more. I really couldn't. I've tried everything. But before you know it, that spectacular gala will be preempting something you actually wanted to watch, so some of you may be thinking, sure, if I watch the award ceremony, there's no doubt I'll be riveted to my TV, because obviously if I weren't, I'd just walk away and do something else. But what I'm really wondering is what's the inside skinny on how you win this coveted award? So just in case you're one of the sad little people whose life is so empty that you would actually think something as pathetic as that, the DailyWire will now take you behind the scenes for an exclusive look at what it takes to win the Oscar. If you want to walk away with gold on Oscar night, you can't just stand around waiting for someone to watch your movie because, let's face it, that's never going to happen. What you have to do is draw attention to yourself by giving interviews in which you express political opinions that are shockingly different than those of someone with even a minimal knowledge of world events. At the same time, of course, it's important that your shockingly different opinion is exactly the same as everyone else's opinion in Hollywood. Otherwise, you can kiss that statuette goodbye. For instance, Ethan Hawke has been nominated for his performance as Lorenz Hart in Blue Moon, which in all honesty would have been the best piece of acting anyone saw this year if anyone had. So, clinging to the laughable delusion that the Best Actor award might go to a white man, Hawke gave an interview in which he reacted to immigration enforcement for all those people in America who woke up that morning thinking, gee, I wonder what that guy who played Lorenz Hart is thinking about immigration enforcement. Hawke told an interviewer, quote, "Never before in America have I felt so afraid to speak my mind that I wouldn't even dare to say what I'm saying right now. But in my role as a man with moral courage, I must come forward with the exact same opinion as everyone else in Hollywood and suffer the consequences, which I hope will be that sweet, sweet statuette. At a time when we in the movie industry are overcome with a sense of crisis totally out of keeping with reality, it's incumbent on us to speak truth to power, as long as it's not the sort of power that could keep me from getting the award I should have gotten for Training Day, but which instead went to Jim Broadbent, whom no one has heard of, in a movie no one saw about Iris Murdoch, whom no one has read. So please, this year, I was in an obscure movie about an artist no one remembers, and now I'm standing here degrading myself by slandering my country and pretending to be afraid for some reason. So please, just give me the award, all right? Please. I'm serious, please." Unquote. Even the front runner has to campaign for the prize. For instance, Sinners received a record 16 Oscar nominations, including Most Over-Nominated Picture and Best Picture with a moderately entertaining first half before the second half dwindles into muddled anti-historical theorizing and shameful anti-white racism. Nonetheless, Sinners' Best Actor nominee, Michael B. Jordan, still felt compelled to give a campaign interview, telling reporters, quote, "So help me, if they give my Oscar to that Faye Cracker in the ping pong movie, I'm going to slap Chris Rock in the face so hard he's going to change his name to Will Smith so no one will remember who he is either." Unquote. So, there you have it. Thanks to this exclusive Inside Hollywood reporting from the Daily Wire, you'll be able to turn on your TV on Oscar night and really enjoy whatever it is you'll be watching instead. Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show. All right, the vast right-wing conspiracy known as Klavanon continues. I hope you don't mind my actually sharing another nice piece of news. Last week I was talking about my genuinely startling Edgar Award for my Edgar Award nomination, I should say, for Kingdom of Cain. It was nominated in the critical biographical category. So I'm just shocked. I'm still reeling about that. But this week, this was less startling, but still very gratifying. My short story, that A Long Time Till Morning, it's called, that was published earlier this year, or earlier last year, I guess, in Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, has been selected for the prestigious Best Mystery of the Year anthology. So it'll be an anthology of the best mystery stories of the year. Every year the stories are selected by a top crime writer. This year it's Tess Gerritsen, who writes the Rizzoli and Isles books. So thank you to her, and thank you to the anthology. It's always an honor. I think this is the third time I've had a story in there. It's really nice. If you have a comment on this show, just keep it to yourself. Or if you'd like to send it to us, put it down wherever you are. If you're looking at DailyWire Plus, or if you're on YouTube or wherever, if you're just, lying around kind of pretending you're listening to the show, then just pretend to leave the comment. We will receive it because you're only living in our imaginations anyway. And we'll read it on the air if it's the kind of thing that would ruin our reputation, because we're doing the best we can. Today's comment comes from Hard Boiled Entertainment. I like the name. It says, on this week's episode, Klavan confessed to not knowing who writes his intros and that they must be, quote, by a mentally ill person, unquote. His subconscious potentially confessing that he is subject to multiple personalities. Actually, if I were subject to multiple personalities, I'd have a bigger writing staff. I mean, it's just me here. It's only me sitting around writing stuff. And that's why you don't get the same kind of high quality comedy you get from Stephen Colbert. He's got I think 20 writers, and that's why he can come on stage and say really witty stuff like F ice. That was what he said on his show this week. F ice. You don't come up with that kind of wit, that kind of precise hilarity if you only got one writer. It takes 20 writers to come up with that for Stephen Colbert. So we're working at a disadvantage. And with that disadvantage, we will plunge headfirst in today's episode, one fake battle after another. The new year used to mean something pretty straightforward. You took stock of your life, you promised yourself you'd do better, you'd work a little harder, you'd be a little stronger, you'd show up for the people who depend on you. The problem is that all that is hard to do if you're not sleeping well. That's why you want to use Beam Dream Powder. It's a healthy nighttime blend packed with proven ingredients shown to improve sleep, so you can wake up refreshed and ready to take on the day. Dream is made with a powerful blend of all natural ingredients: reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin. And unlike other sleep aids, there's no next day grogginess, just great restful sleep. And as someone that struggles with sleep, I use it when I want to just put myself out. I especially love sea salt caramel. That is my jam. It's delicious. It's the perfect hot cocoa before bed, and it truly does make a difference. It really does help you fall asleep fast. So if you've been waiting for the right time to try Dream, this happens to be it. They're offering my listeners an exclusive discount going into the new year. Go to shopbeam.com/Klavan. Use code Klavan to get my exclusive offer for up to 40% off Beam's Dream Powder. With my discount code Klavan, you can get their best-selling Dream Powder for just $39. Seriously, think about it. How much would you pay for a truly great night of sleep? With my discount, it's just $125 per night. So go to shopbeam.com/ how do you spell it? KLAVAN. Chapter 1, the media amnesia machine. If I had to pick one thing I find most aggravating about the coverage of the Trump administration, it would be that everything happens in a vacuum, a memory vacuum, because they didn't cover the Biden administration. They don't cover Democrat administrations. They only cover Republican administrations. They only plunge deep and dig deep for the things that are going wrong in Republican administration. So it's as if there's just this blank space, a historical blank space before. I was having drinks with a friend of mine who's a reporter, and he's a good reporter, and he's a fair, kind of middle of the road guy. And he was saying, you right-wing reporters aren't hard enough on Trump. And I said, it's because it takes all your effort just to place Trump in context with what came before him, because what came before him wasn't covered. So this week, I'm sure you know already, one of the left-wing rioters who've been harassing and impeding federal law enforcement in the carrying out of their legal duties of deporting illegal people was shot in a melee with ICE. And it looked like two ICE agents discharged their guns, and the officers saw he was carrying a gun. Somebody shouted, as the cops do when they say gun, and the guy ended up dead. And immediately we're swept up into a conversation about this guy's death, right? Was it a fair shooting? Was the dead guy, the guy's name was Alex Preddy, I think his last name was he a good guy? Was he a bad guy? Isn't it time to reconsider the actions of ICE in this? And so, let's just go through really quickly how this plays out, because it always plays out the same way. So here's Elizabeth Warren discussing the guy who was shot. It's cut 1.
I'm here to be part of getting the truth out. Alex was an ICU nurse at the Minneapolis VA hospital, a nurse for veterans. He was a son, a brother, a friend, a caretaker. And he was killed while he was trying to help a woman who had been pushed to the ground by a federal agent. The last words that Alex spoke on this earth were, "Are you all right?" Those are the words of a good man trying to help someone who had been knocked down by an out-of-control ICE agent. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise.
Okay, now the administration kind of bobbled the ball here. They immediately started to condemn the guy with the same extreme terms that Elizabeth Warren was praising him. So here's just a quick cut of Kristi Noem, head of Homeland Security, too.
When you perpetuate violence against a government because of ideological reasons and for reasons to resist and perpetuate violence, that is the definition of domestic terrorism. This individual who came with weapons and ammunition to stop a law enforcement operation of federal law enforcement officers committed an act of domestic terrorism. That's the facts.
So, and then I think Stephen Miller, I think it was Stephen Miller who called him like an assassin, said he had come there armed, ready to shoot ICE agents. And I'm a big fan of Stephen Miller's because of his big mouth, but sometimes when you have a big mouth, it's very easy to put your foot in it. But it does seem like this guy was an activist. There's a video of him in what it appears to be him, and they apparently, I think the BBC did facial recognition on it, and it's identified it as this guy with 97% accuracy attacking ICE agents before this in a car, kicking the taillight out of their car and screaming, trying to challenge them to a fight. And the New York Post says he broke a rib in this tussle with ICE agents. So, that doesn't make the shooting good, but the whole thing has to be investigated, which is what the administration should have said. So that's part of it. The first thing that happens, you get this, who is this guy, and wasn't he a saint, and wasn't he a villain, and as if that tells you whether the shooting was any good or not. And then you have the experts on TV who examine the videos. These are my favorites because they're the stupidest. And if you want really stupid commentary, let's go to Jake, Let COVID Dominate Your Life Tapper. This was what he said in an exchange with a former Trump official. Cut 4.
5 or 6 officers jumping on somebody who obviously was immediately on the ground, and one hand was on the ground and one hand was holding his camera, is not evidence that 6 people needed to be doing that. That's like saying he deserved to be shot. Otherwise, why would the officers have shot him? You really don't think that they did anything, that there's any question about whether or not this man deserved to be shot? You really think that this was fine? This was a fine act? Because I don't even think there are people in the Trump administration who are arguing that.
See, what gets me about this is people who look at these videos, especially if they've never been in any kind of an altercation. Now, when I was a kid, I'm not a cop. I haven't been in gun fights or anything like that, but I was in a lot of fist fights, when I was a kid. And they don't know what they're talking about. First of all, the cops always pile on a guy because it's safer. It's safer for them, and it's safer for the perp. The thing is, if it's one-on-one, then you've got to do anything you can to bring that guy down, and that means that the guy is probably going to get hurt, and the cop might get hurt, and that's the one thing we don't want. The most important thing is that law enforcement gets home safe. And so they pile on these guys so that they overwhelm them with overwhelming force, and they wrestle them down. And then the guy had a gun. He was carrying a gun. He has the right to carry a gun, but he put himself in a situation where the cops start shouting, "Gun, gun." And once that happens, all bets are off because, they say we studied this frame by frame, but life doesn't take place frame by frame. It takes place all at once. And when somebody shouts gun and there's a flash in his hand, you don't have time to see whether it's a phone or a gun. So none of that really tells you anything, especially when it's done by some clown on CNN. Then it doesn't mean anything. They should remember this from the left side. The Rodney King riots burned down L.A. in 1992, and one of the reasons was 4 LAPD police officers were acquitted of beating Rodney King up. And the reason they were acquitted is because they showed the jury the video of it frame by frame, and it looked like he was fighting back and all this. And maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But you couldn't tell from that. You kind of have to be there. You have to see it in the way it happened before you see what the cops saw. So life doesn't happen frame by frame. It happens all at once. Anyway, Trump realized that because of the mouthing off of Kristi Noem and Miller, that he was losing the public, and Trump is very sensitive to that, and he responded. So Border Control's Gregory Bovino was handling things in Minneapolis, and he sent him back to the border because he's a very gung-ho guy, and a little less gung-ho in cities. It's a little easier to be gung-ho in Texas, where there's nobody around, than it is to be in a crowded city. And so maybe he was not the right guy for the job. He's quieted. He hasn't fired Kristi Noem, but he has kind of put her in the corner for a while, and he reinstated the great Tom Homan, who we love. He's the best. He's just a really tough cop, but also knows exactly what's been going on. He was awarded a medal by Obama. He's worked for all these people, and he said is under Biden it was worse. The border was worse than anything. It's like nothing he'd ever seen before. And he came out, he met with, Walsh, and I think he met with Frey, the mayor, and he came out and said, look, that they're going to help ICE by handing over criminals that they've arrested. If the guy is not just an illegal, but has committed other crimes, they're going to hand them over, which is one of the reasons this has been so difficult. And that will help ICE move some of the army of ICE agents out, so there won't be that many people swarming the streets. And he says that this will help them, kind of calm things down. There's Homan in a press conference, cut 3.
I want to be clear. I don't read a lot of social media. I don't read a lot of media. I don't believe half what I see. We are not surrendering the president's mission in immigration enforcement. Let's make that clear. Prioritization of criminal aliens doesn't mean that we forget about everybody else. That's just simply ridiculous. But when you have a criminal standing here and a non-criminal standing there, that criminal always should be targeted first because he's a significant concern to the safety and security of the community. By and large, for decades, ICE and CBP have carried out their duties with integrity, professionalism, and compassion. That remains the expectation of President Trump, and I will, hold our agents and officers to that standard.
So you see what he did was he put it back in the general in context. He put it back in context. This is what's happening. This guy gets shot. It has to be investigated, but we're still doing what we have to do. And he had the wit, because he's a very bright guy, he had the wit to put it back in context with the last 4 years. This is cut 11.
We got to all remember why the questions we've seen and why we're here. What started this? 4 years of an open border where millions of people are letting this country unvetted. Remember, let's not forget, for 4 years, we were told the border was secure. 4 years, we were told the border was secure. And we all knew it wasn't. And I want this to be a positive thing we're doing here today. I also want to remember the politicians are continually attacking us. Where were they the last 4 years?
Right, exactly. So in that context, here's my feeling about the whole thing. It's sad the guy died. I don't want to see people getting shot, obviously. But so what? So what? What's it got to do with what's going on? I mean, if it was a bad shooting, that should be investigated. If it was a good shooting, that the officer should be cleared. But people poured into this country illegally by the millions. What we should be talking about is how to get them out. How do we get all of them out, the criminals first and the rest of them later, because they've got to leave because they broke the law. And the one thing we know the Democrats believe is that no one is above the law. This is what the anti-Trumpers were telling us for years. Here's cut 12, just a sample, a little sample.
The idea that no person is above the law is a bedrock principle of American justice.
No man is above the law, no matter what the crime.
And I agree with you. No man is above the law, and no person is above the law.
No one is above the law.
No one is above the law.
No one's above the law.
No one is above the law.
No man is above the law.
Nobody is above the law.
No one is above the law.
No man is above the law.
He has to be held accountable. He's not above the law.
No one's above the law. Either that nor any other title puts you above the rule of law.
All right, so that video goes on for many, many minutes. It's just a sample of it. But we know the Democrats believe that because the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, the then former president of the United States, Donald Trump, who was also the front runner of the Republican Party, he was the front running candidate for the Republican Party, he was charged and convicted of multiple felonies. For what? Because he wrote the wrong words on a check to his lawyer. His lawyer paid off a girl to keep her mouth shut about their alleged affair, and he paid the lawyer back, and he wrote on the check, legal expense. And they ginned that up into a literal federal case by claiming it was fraud to have an effect on the election or something or other. They weren't even sure what it was. In New York, they suspended the statute of limitations specifically so a woman could accuse Trump of raping her in some year or other, so that Trump couldn't possibly defend himself, because how can you have an alibi for some year or other? She didn't even know when it was. And when they couldn't convict him of, they hit him with an $80 million civil penalty because no one is above the law. Jack Smith was going to charge Trump with a federal crime for saying that the 2020 election was stolen. And you may say, well, isn't that covered by the First Amendment? But no, never mind the First Amendment. That was going to be words spoken that were untrue to affect an election, which means anytime a candidate makes a promise that doesn't turn out to be true, he's guilty and it must be carted away. And we know no one is above the law because Ashley Babbitt was shot dead by a police officer for climbing through a window in the Capitol on January 6th, and the police officer who shot her was celebrated because no one is above the law. So, okay, a protester got shot. Okay, I get it. Investigate the shooting. I'm fine with that, and we should do, but keep deporting illegals because they're here illegally and no one is above the law. The Democrats told me so it must be true. And I understand, that it's popular to say that criminals get out first. And yes, of course, the criminals should go first, but all of them, even the nice people. I'm a nice person, but when I speed, I get pulled over and given a ticket because no one is above the law. And here's more context. I just want to keep saying this because every conversation is empty of this. It's all about, well, was he this? Was Frey, was the guy who was shot, Preddy, was he a nice guy? Was he a bad guy? Are they acting badly? Are these people, just acting without any conscience whatsoever? Forget it. They're law enforcement officers. There can be a bad one, but there are plenty of good ones. That's not the issue. The issue is how are we going to get these millions of people out of the country, and why were they brought in? They're brought into this country. They didn't open the borders because we're so lovely, we're so welcoming, we're so nice that anybody can move into our house. I mean, Joe Biden still has a door on his house. He's not letting everybody into his house. He's just letting everybody into our house, into the people's house. And the reason for that is because support for leftism is crumbling throughout the West. Our friend Henry Olsen, the best numbers guy in politics, he's been writing about this for years, and he says that here in America specifically, Trump assembled a coalition, says Henry, that few had dreamed of, one that sacrificed moderate college-educated whites for somewhat conservative non-college whites combined with the GOP's conservative core. And also he could include working-class people of different colors. And that's happening in countries throughout the West, a kind of MAGA coalition, you can call it a populist, nationalist, right, whatever you want to call it, has been growing throughout Europe. And in Europe, the reaction has been a judge overturned an election in Romania. In France and Germany, left-wing and moderate parties banded together to keep right-wing parties from winning elections they would have won under normal voting circumstances. And in the UK, essentially, they've just gotten rid of free speech. They've just shut down free speech so that the opinions of most Britons can't be heard. They become illegal if you say, hey, get the Muslims out of here. They don't like us. We don't like them. Get rid of them. We're England. We should be English. No. That you can go to prison for that. And this is because it's not because of the far right. It's because of the MAGA right. It's because of these people that are slowly becoming a majority. And the Democrats are desperate because they can't change their opinions, so they have nothing to pull people back in with. And everything they've done in Europe, they've tried to do here. They've tried to silence people. They've tried to knock them off social media. They've demonized them as Nazis. They investigate them with the FBI. All because they're losing, and they think if they replace us with these people coming in, and don't let them tell you it's about color. It's not about color in America. In other countries, it might be about color, but here in America, everybody's here. We're all here together. We all know it. We may be a majority white country, but it's not a white country. That's ridiculous. And the reason they hate Trump so much is because he doesn't care. He transgresses all the firewalls of racial hatred because that they started, the racial hatred that they're trying to keep alive. They're kind of blowing it like a spark to keep the fire burning. And Trump has transcended that by inviting, Hispanic working class people and black working class people and white working class people all into the right-wing, sort of right-wing party. They're not conservatives like the old, standard conservatives, but it's a largely conservative coalition. And think about this for a minute, all right? And this is just one more piece of important context because I think about this all the time. George Floyd was a thug. He held a woman at gunpoint while his friends ransacked her place so they could rob her to buy drugs. And a lot of people say she was pregnant. Apparently, that's a legend, but still, I mean, that would have made it worse. But it's as bad as it can possibly be anyway. He was arrested for possession of drugs, and he probably died of a drug overdose when he tried to swallow the evidence. I think that's the most likely thing that happened. The cop who had him in custody, he may have made some errors as he was holding them there, but he didn't do what they said he did, and he was sent away for life for murder. He will die in prison for murder in what will become, I guarantee you, a historic case of miscarriage of justice. And I'm almost certain of that. It's a terrible thing what they did to that guy, and the arrest may have been badly handled. I think in some ways it was not a good arrest, but he didn't murder anybody. That's ridiculous. They burned cities on the basis of this. They burned cities down across the country. People died while the news outlets told us it was mostly peaceful. Right? You remember this. You're not that young. You remember that this was mostly peaceful. An editor at the New York Times said, it's not violence. It's just buildings that are being burned. Never mind the people who died, the dreams that went up in smoke, the property that was destroyed, the stores that people worked all their lives to own. Never mind that. They tore down statues of George Washington and built statues to this piece of crap, George Floyd. And we got garbage like this from President Biden. Cut 5.
I just had an opportunity to speak with the Floyd family and a group of them, most of them. They're a close, decent, honorable family, loving one another. And once again, we had the words, heard the words, and they heard them. I can't breathe. An act of brutality so elemental, it did more than deny one more black man in America his civil rights and his human rights. It denied him of his very humanity. It denied him of his life. Depriving George Floyd is, as it deprived Eric Garner, one of the things every human being must be able to do. Breathe. So simple, so basic, so brutal.
It's just a passel of lies, but again, making a hagiography of this petty criminal who died resisting arrest because he resisted arrest, probably of a drug overdose when he ate the evidence. So what this tells you, it tells you something really important. What's happening now, the shooting of Preddy, the shooting of the woman Good, or the killing of the woman Good, this isn't an incident. These aren't incidents. This is a playbook. This is a playbook. They did this to us just a couple of years ago. We can't forget. And the media just wants it to forget. It's just induced amnesia. It's just supposed to have gone away that, oh yes, we do this every single time. And it's never about the issue. It's always about the incident. And the incident is being made by a playbook. And it's all being funded by very, very wealthy white people who are funding this. Barton Swaim, really good writer at the Wall Street Journal, he lays all this out, that it started with climate panic. The climate change was panicking all these wealthy people, and they were giving donations and all this. And there was a cap and trade bill in 2010 that wanted to cap carbon emissions. And that bill died. It didn't get passed. And the leftist donors decided that democracy was not going to save us. They had to start funneling their money into what Swaim calls an army of nonprofit groups. And when that money went into those groups, it started spreading out. So it started with climate change, but then it got to be all the other things that they want, the equity and the LGBTQ stuff and all this. Mackenzie Scott, who's the wife of Jeff Bezos, has donated $26 billion. I wrote that down. Is that possible? She donated $26 billion to left-wing causes, and of course George Soros and Michael Bloomberg, Tom Steyer. So Swaim's point is this: people are pretty much divided on deportation, right? A majority want the illegals gone, but about 50% don't want to see what it looks like when the illegals are gone, because it takes some roughhousing and they don't want to see that. But what you're seeing on the streets of Minneapolis are not the people. They are not the people. They are paid resistance agitators of these billionaires sent to cause chaos. And when somebody gets killed, it's kind of like Hamas. They're thrilled because they can turn that into an incident. It's not about that. No one's above the law. The illegals came here illegally. They broke the law. They have got to go home. All right, let me tell you about our sponsor, Ethos, because you have to have life insurance. If you're like me, you could fall down dead any minute. And you are like me because you could fall down dead any minute. And people need you. People depend on you. They depend on your income. They depend on your presence. They depend on a lot of things that will not be there if unfortunately, you should be gone. So Ethos has changed the game when it comes to getting life insurance. The whole thing's done online, which means you can get a quote in seconds and actually apply in just a few minutes. No medical exam required. Just answer some straightforward health questions, and you could have coverage the same day. They offer policies up to $3 million, and some of them run as low as $30 a month. Business Insider just named them the #1 no medical exam instant life insurance provider as of March 2025. And when you look at their Trustpilot rating, 4.8 out of 5 stars with over 3,000 reviews, you can see people are pretty happy with them. That's very hard to get a 4.8 with that many reviews. It's honestly the easiest way I have seen to get this kind of coverage without all the usual hassle. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/Klavan. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get your free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/Klavan. That's ETHOS.com/Klavan. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking anybody can spell Ethos, but how? Oh, how? Please tell me how. Do you spell Klavan? It's Klavan. Application times and rates may vary. Chapter 2, 100% guaranteed corrupt. So whenever conservatives complain about the corruption of the media, because none of this stuff would work if it weren't for the media, if the media weren't holding it up. The New York Times and other corrupt leftist outlets say the Republicans are complaining about the alleged left-wing bias of the media. And then the right tries to prove its point by showing times when the media was left-wing. You know, and our friends at Newsbusters, the Media Research Center, I think they're absolutely great. They just did a study showing that 93% of the coverage on the networks of ICE has been anti-ICE. It's been negative toward federal immigration officials. So that's the way we try to prove it. But I think there's something more essential that we should look at, because I think this is the real corruption. You know, the left always came up with this clever idea of systemic racism. And the idea of systemic racism is you don't have to be a racist yourself to be a racist because you're in a racist system. So simply by getting up in the morning and going to work, you're a racist because the entire system is racist. Now that's nonsense. This is the least racist country on earth. It is, without a doubt, the least racist country on earth. So that's nonsense. But the idea is not nonsense. If you are in a systemically corrupt system, you will be doing corruption, right? If you're an honorable man who gets swept into the Nazi bureaucracy, you're going to be doing evil because it's systemically evil. The media is systemically corrupt. And let me show you what I mean. Look at one thing that's the tell is language. Why is climate change called climate change instead of global warming, right? It used to be global warming, now it's climate change. And we all know why they changed it, because global warming doesn't panic people when it's 17 degrees outside. People look around and go like, yeah, global warming, come on. So they changed it to climate change. So whatever happens, heavy snow, lots of heat, you can always blame it's the climate change crisis. We must shut down oil and fossil fuels and just live in caves and, maybe start a fire now and again after we kill a mammoth. That's basically the idea. But show me a news outlet that doesn't use that language. Show me one. Well, news outlet that does not use the language climate change. Why did they change? Why isn't it called what used to be called global warming or so-called global warming or the so-called crisis? Maybe a commentator on Fox News will say the so-called climate change crisis, but they all have changed. They have all changed. Here's another one. I very rarely write angry letters to the editor of the paper. Maybe once in 5 years, I'll see something that makes me so annoyed and think the newspaper or the editor, wherever I'm writing to, might listen to me. The last one I wrote was to the Wall Street Journal. They were doing a story about Governor DeSantis in Florida fighting about kids being mutilated to serve this transgender mental illness that was spreading. And they called the process gender-affirming care. And I wrote in and I said, well, wait a minute. Does Governor DeSantis call it that? Does he call it gender-affirming care? Isn't that what the article is about? This argument between some people who think it's gender-affirming care and some people who think it's a Nazi-level atrocity. I used to say if Joseph Mengele, the evil Nazi doctor who did experiments on people, just a horrifying monster of a human being, if he'd explained gender-affirming care to Hitler, Hitler would have reeled back in horror and said, whoa, who do you think I am, Adolf Hitler? That's how horrible it was. Why were they using that term? Sex workers, another one. Suddenly, go on the Wall Street Journal, go on Fox News. Fox News, they health risks for female sex workers. NYPD stops collecting condoms from sex workers. This is a conservative outlet, Fox News, good outlet. Why? How did they stop being prostitutes? When did they stop being prostitutes and why? What conservative wanted to change the name prostitute to sex workers? What moderate person thought there was a need to change that? Only the left wants to do that. The left wants to normalize destructive and self-destructive sexual practices in order to destroy the family, because the family is the central building block of freedom, and they want to denature the language. They want to take the morality out of it. And since prostitution, we all know, is one of the most destructive things that a woman can do to herself, and in using a prostitute is one of the most destructive things a man can do to himself, they want to take that out of it and call them sex workers to get at the family structure. I'm just listing them off as they come into my head, capitalizing black as opposed to white. When you say black, it has to be a capital letter. I went through after that, the dark, after the copy editor. I'm not blaming the copy editor. She's just doing what her book tells her to do. And I just put all the blacks into lowercase again, because I thought if white is lowercase, then black is lowercase. That's ridiculous. Why was it done? It was done for political reasons, and yet everybody does it now. So think about that. The language, when we were talking about George Floyd, they still say, that back then when there was a racial reckoning. There was no racial reckoning. A sad incident in which a drug addict died while resisting arrest. A drug addict died while resisting arrest. It was played into a major crisis so that cities would burn and they could install things like DEI and equity into the system. It wasn't America coming to terms with its racist past. It was the left using the media, the left-wing media, the corrupt media, to push this stuff down America's throat. And this is the thing that gets me. This is the story, because there are millions of people here illegally. They have to go home. We have to send them home. And sometimes it looks ugly to do that, but we have to do it. And an organized billionaire, funded leftist resistance is making it violent. And the thing is, you have to understand how pervasive this is. If Fox News is using terms that only the left wants used, right? It just is the air that we're breathing. It's the air that we're breathing. It's systemic corruption. And that's why this stuff works. And that's why we're talking about, Alex Preddy dying, instead of talking about the fact that the illegals have to go. Now, this is the part in this ad for Helix mattresses when I'm supposed to tell you that I'm trying to sleep better, but I've given up. I'm never going to sleep that well, but I do enjoy my Helix mattress because I'm up all night thinking, hey, this is a really comfortable mattress. And now, finding the right mattress, it doesn't have to be complicated at all, because Helix actually makes it straightforward with their sleep quiz. It matches you to your perfect mattress based on your specific preferences and sleep needs. They're not just another mattress company. Helix is the most awarded mattress brand out there, with glowing reviews from major publications like Forbes and Wired. It's not just marketing hype. A study they conducted found that 82% of participants actually saw an increase in their deep sleep cycle while sleeping on a Helix mattress, which is pretty impressive when you think about how crucial quality sleep is for everyone but me. I love the Helix mattress. I really do. And I just love lying on it and thinking, wow, this thing is so comfortable, I might even fall asleep. That doesn't happen, of course, but I do get to think this is a comfortable mattress. And they even offer free shipping straight to your door, 120-night sleep trial, so you can actually test it out in your own home. And returns and exchanges are seamless if it's not quite right, but it will be. Plus, they back everything up with a limited lifetime warranty. Start sleeping right tonight by ordering a Helix mattress today. Go to helixsleep.com/Klavan for 20% off site-wide. That's helixsleep.com/Klavan for 20% off site-wide. Make sure you enter our show name after checkout so they know we sent you, but that means you got to know how to spell Klavan. So it's helixsleep.com/get this, KLAVAN. Chapter 3, Manning the Bari-Cades. This is about Barry Weiss, and it's only partly about Barry Weiss. If you asked me what was the biggest news story of this period of time, obviously it would be Trump at some level. I think it would be Trump. But if you asked me for what was the meta news story, even bigger than Trump, it would be this fight over information territory. It is the most vicious fight there is. And the fact that almost every outlet is covering it again as if it were an incident instead of an arranged attack, to a arranged defense of territory. So Barry Weiss leaves the New York Times. Barry Weiss is gay married to Nellie Bowles. Nellie Bowles wrote the two of them. I like the two of them very much, and Nellie is an incredibly charming lady, and she wanted to go and cover what was happening. I believe it was in Seattle or Portland. I think it was Seattle. And during like all of this craziness that grew up around COVID and George Floyd and all this stuff, and the editors told her, this is a time for white people to stand down. Don't cover the story. Don't cover the story because you might make people look bad. Do not do it. And they called, she was dating Barry Weiss, and they told her Barry Weiss is a Nazi. Now, Barry Weiss is hard to pinhole what she is. I mean, obviously she's a gay, she's a lesbian. They have two kids, birthed by Nellie, but obviously with a donation of sperm. I think that kind of leaves her out of the conservative stronghold. She's Jewish. She obviously supports Israel very strongly, especially after the Hamas terrorist attacks. And the people she hires at the Free Press, which was the place she started when she left the Times, they cover a range. I'd call it a moderately, maybe to the right. I mean, obviously socially to the left, not necessarily friendly to Trump all the time, but moderately to the right and supporting Israel, I suppose. And maybe some people say she's a neocon. If that's only defined by supporting Israel, maybe so. But it has a lot of different opinions there, and it's kind of a moderate place. She gets paid $150 million by Paramount, and she gets appointed to lead the news, to be the head of the news department at CBS, a storied news department. That sucks. It sucks. They do a bad job. They've been doing a bad job. People stop watching because they don't trust them. Nobody trusts the news media. Nobody trusts the news media except Democrats. Democrats trust the news media because it's telling them what they want to say. And as I was pointing out with the language, which is the total tell, I mean, that's the tell, that the fact that everybody uses left-wing language and changes to use left-wing language, that's what gives it away. Nobody ever calls me and says, what should we call prostitutes? Because I would say, call them prostitutes. That's what they are. Why would you not go? Why would you change it? Nobody calls me. That's not who they call. They are all of them dominated by the left. So every week she is being attacked. Every week. And people discuss, well, did she do this? Did she do that? No, it is just, she's like a piece of dust in the machinery. The machinery is so massive that poor Barry is just this piece of dust. They saw her coming. We knew what was going to happen to her. We could just count it. And all of these stories, the New Yorker, I think there was a 9,000 word story. Variety did a story. All of them quoting people in the newsroom anonymously. Why do you have to quote them anonymously? Let them come out and say what they have to say. Let them come out and say what they have to say. They're not government workers who might get arrested or something like that. Let them come out and say what they have to say. So, everything she does, there's a leak. Whatever she does, there's a leak. And she goes and had a meeting, and she said to the people, we're not producing a product enough people want. What winning looks like writ large for this company is building incredible journalism for audiences that are so much bigger than the one that we currently have. In other words, play fair. Why should the news be for just one side of the country? 80 million people voted for Donald Trump or thereabouts. Why does the rest of the country, those 80 million people, not get news that looks like something like the country looks like to them the way it looks to Democrats? Why? Why is this something? And we all know this. It's just this defense. Remember when Elon Musk took over X, and like that, he went from being a hero of ecology because it was selling electric cars with the government paying huge amounts of money to keep the prices affordable. He went to the most villainous villain in all the history of villainy. He was terrible. Why? Because he took over X and let right-wingers speak. He stopped blocking them and let them speak. And for a while, the place was horrible. X was terrible. Now it's getting better again because he realizes that some people do need to sort of be pushed aside because they're ugly and they have nothing to say but hatred and all this stuff. on the left as well as the right, but it's still, I can still go on there and say what I have to say and have an audience. And suddenly he became a villain. That's what did it. The Washington Post, Jeff Bezos wants to bring the Washington Post in line. He's already brought the op-ed section in line, but he wants to bring the news section in line. And so there are rumors that a lot of people are going to get fired, maybe exceeding 100. Look at the news stories about it. Look at the news. Oh my God, they're destroying. Democracy dies in darkness. Democracy dies in darkness. Democracy is, I read the Washington Post, I get it every morning. The op-ed section has become much, much better, much, much more fair. Both sides are covered, but it's much, much more intelligent and more fair. The news department sucks. It sucks. This is the thing. They complain, they make it sound like, the Constitution demands that we keep our jobs, but they're doing a bad job. They do a bad job. It's all Trump. The art section is hilarious. They'll say, here's a good book, and what an irony that a good book should come out while Donald Trump is destroying America. And you think, like, it's about gardening, What's that got to do with it? It's an absurd newspaper, and Jeff Bezos should fix it and give us a good newspaper. How would that hurt the Republic if we had a good newspaper? This battle that's going on is the battle that is happening. It's more important than what's going on in the streets of Minneapolis. It's more important than the economic news. It's more important than ever. This is the battle. Donald Trump won in part because he's Donald Trump. No question about it. It wouldn't have happened without him. But he also won because this little ragtag army of rebel media got the word out, as is happening now in Minneapolis, so that when Elizabeth Warren says he was a friend, he was a saint, he was a god, he was this close to being Jesus Christ, we can come out and say, yeah, here's a video of him kicking in the taillight of a law enforcement officer's car and challenging him to a fight, maybe not a saint. And it comes out in real time. We're as fast as they are now. We're just not as big. We don't have the reporting power that they have. The New York Times is a passel of lies, but they have some of the best reporting and the most reporting power out there. So this is what's happening. And it's happening in Hollywood too. Look at the pictures that were nominated. That one battle after another is just a pain to left-wing violence, and it's left-wing violence against ICE. It's left-wing violence against people who are trying to deport illegals, and they just make it that's this nature of heroism in the movie. That is the definition of heroism in the movie, and the only good person in the movie is Benicio del Toro, who's obviously helping the refugees, the migrants, the illegals. He's helping the illegals. So I'm a conservative, obviously. I mean, I have some liberal ideas, but I'm mostly a conservative. I want my side to win, but I don't want my side to win by crushing the opposition. I know I live in a country that's going to have some left-wingers in it. I know I have to win the argument. I can't win the argument if I can't speak. That's why they're silencing me, because my arguments are better than theirs. That's why. That is why they took us off. That's why they tried to destroy the DailyWire on Facebook. That's why they've tried to destroy City Journal on Facebook. They just tried to block everything because they can't win the argument. It's like they can't win it. And that's the fight that we're seeing. And so when all of this happens, just ask yourself every single time, is this the conversation we should be having? Why are we having a conversation about a shooting in Minneapolis instead of the conversation about how are we going to get those illegals out of Minneapolis when the governor is such a putz? That's the conversation we should be having, because that's the issue. But the issue is only about the shootings because of the press. And the press is the servant of these people who are funded by billionaires. So you have the most powerful people in the country governing by riot. That is what they're doing, governing by fear, governing by lies, governing by riot. And that's what's happening. And until we start asking these questions, the real questions, and until we have a media and a creative force that can ask the real questions and focus on the real questions, all our victories will be ephemeral. They'll come and go. But this is the thing. We have to pay attention when we see what's happening at CBS, at the Washington Post. These are the fights we're in, and we have to pay attention. One of the many things that bothers me about politics is that it can make you grind your teeth. I'm not even going to ask you if this happens to you, because I know it does. You'll be watching some news media guy lying through his teeth, and suddenly you're grinding your teeth, which is ridiculous. He's lying through his teeth. We should grind his teeth. But in fact, we grind our teeth. And if you are part of the 30% of Americans who grind their teeth, then your smile needs protection from our sponsor, Remi. Make it your year by grabbing your own night guard. Remi's custom night guards are clinically tested and FDA cleared to prevent teeth grinding, reduce jaw tension, and facial muscle strain, and improve sleep quality. What makes them special is that you get the same professional quality and comfort as a night guard from the dentist, but Remi costs you 80% less and is way more convenient than having to schedule appointments and go into the dentist's office. Here's how it works. First, you'll receive your impression kit straight to your door. Then you'll follow Remi's step-by-step instructions to get your perfect impression. From there, Remi crafts and ships you your custom-fit night guard. And once you get your night guard back, you can start protecting your teeth right away. I know that Knowles has been using Remi, and he loves it. I mean, he's using it because he thinks he can be better looking, which I don't know about that, but maybe his smile could be a little bit better. And he says it's simple to get started, and it's no hassle at all. Start the new year right and use code Klavan to get 50% off your purchase of a new night guard. That's 50% off at Shop Remi, shopremi.com/Klavan. How do you spell that? It's Klavan. You'll need to know it because you want to go to remi.com/Klavan and use code Klavan. And thank you to Remi for sponsoring this episode. Final chapter, The Jew is Silent. Now, January 27th was Holocaust Memorial Day, and there's been a little bit of a kerfuffle about this, about a statement made by J.D. Vance. And here was J.D. Vance's statement about the Holocaust. Today we remember the millions of lives lost during the Holocaust, the millions of stories of individual bravery and heroism, and one of the enduring lessons of one of the darkest chapters in human history, that while humans create beautiful things and are full of compassion, we're also capable of unspeakable brutality, and we promise never again to go down the darkest path. So guess what he was attacked for? He was attacked for not mentioning the fact that the people being murdered were Jews, were specifically Jews. And Donald Trump did not make that mistake. He said, we remember one of the darkest periods in human history. Today we pay respect to the blessed memories of the millions of Jewish people who were murdered at the hands of the Nazi regime. Not that hard to do. On the other hand, people were upset with J.D. Vance. And part of this is because he's cozied up to Tucker Carlson, who has been absolutely despicable in his sly but obvious anti-Semitism. It's just absolute trash that's coming out of that guy's mouth, and he's doing it. He's smart enough to do it in a way where it can't quite be pinned on him, but it's his fault. And so people want to know where Vance stands, and that is a fair thing because he has a good shot at being the next president of the United States. So I still have a lot of faith in Vance. I still have faith in Vance, but I would like to see him sack up and basically just speak clearly about these things. So let's take it away from Vance. He paid tribute to Holocaust, and that's a good thing. But here was also the BBC's Cut 7.
Today marks Holocaust Memorial Day, a day for remembering the 6 million people who were murdered by the Nazi regime over 80 years ago.
Today marks Holocaust Memorial Day, a day for remembering the 6 million people who were murdered by the Nazi regime.
Now, to be fair, in a British accent, if you work for the BBC, getting the word Jew out of your mouth, very, very difficult. Because you'll lose all your friends. But, and look, I have a certain compassion or understanding of people who react to Jews overreacting to these things. I get it. Jews get touchy. You kind of wonder why. It's because when you wipe out like most of your population over the course of 2,000 years of exile and pogroms and killings and ghettos and all that stuff, you get a little touchy. You get, what can I say? It makes people a little touchy. So it's understandable, but it's not great PR because it is true that Jewish commentators tend to go from he's a wonderful guy to he's a Nazi whore like that. They tend to overstate their case a little bit, but it's very understandable, and I understand it. But I want to explain why this matters. It does matter, okay? The feeling for the Holocaust is passing, and nothing lasts more than a generation. Memories fade. Even, as I always say, even grass grows over the biggest grave, and that's the way it has to be. History has to become history. But the left has been taking the Jew out of the Holocaust for years. The left has been doing this. I noticed this in the 1980s, okay? This is how long ago I noticed that suddenly the Holocaust, it's about bigotry. It's about exclusion. It's about othering. It's about racism. And that's how you get from there to the fact that anybody who opposes affirmative action is a Nazi. That's how everybody became Hitler. You'd say, I don't really believe in affirmative action. You're a Hitler, because that's what the Holocaust was about. It's not. The Holocaust is about killing Jews. It was only about, yeah, there were some gay people thrown in there. There were plenty of, Poles and prisoners and all that. But the point, the obsession that Hitler had and that the Germans fell in with was killing the Jews. It is the most well-documented atrocity in human history. The Germans are, if the Germans are good at nothing, and listen, I actually like the German people. They've produced some of the greatest culture on earth, but if they're good at nothing else, it's keeping records. They kept records. That's how they know the kind of numbers they are. And if you're getting your history from some tweet who says oh, but wait, how could they do this? Read a book. Read a book, educate yourself. Try reading a book for, like Night by Elie Wiesel. It's only about 80 pages. You can read it in a half hour. You can watch the long documentary Shoah, which is the only really great work of art about the Holocaust. And that's a documentary. It doesn't show you anything ugly. It doesn't show you all the bodies. It's just interviews with people who were there. It is a great work of art. And you will learn that this is a well-documented murder of most of the Jewish population of Europe. And they were murdered not because of who the Jews are. They were murdered because of what the Jews mean to the people who kill them. And, even Jews don't like to hear me talk about this because they want to come up with it's about conspiracy theories or something. They want to take it off themselves, but it is indelible. They cannot stop meaning this to the people who hate them. Europe was formed by Christianity and by Catholic Christianity. And for a long time, Catholic Christianity held very clearly that the Jews' covenant with God was over, and the church was now the new Israel, and the Jews are rejected by God. The Catholics don't like to admit that they changed their minds, but over time, they do change their minds. That which is called supersessionism, I think, replacement theology, that was explicitly rejected in Vatican II. And the Catholic Catechism, no matter what Michael Knowles says, it now maintains that the original covenant with the Jews is still in effect. Of course it is. God doesn't make a promise and then break it, but it's nuts. It's nuts. It's the kind of thing that human beings say, Human beings say, oh, now we're the Jews. It's like the kind of petty, stupid, small-minded thing that human beings says. It doesn't sound like God, who says, you know what I'm going to do? You all deserve to go to hell, but instead I'm going to die. That's what God sounds like, all right? It doesn't sound like, oh, I'm breaking my promise with all the Jews. All right. So for me, as a Jew who became a Christian, and I know every time I talk, some sect, possibly Catholicism, will find me heretical. But to me, the Old Testament is the New, and I've told this to Barry Weiss, as Newton is to Einstein, right? Newton isn't wrong. What he says is true, but Einstein gives it a much larger context in which some of the things that didn't quite hold together, we couldn't quite understand, are explained, right? The Gentiles have been grafted on to the tree of Israel, as St. Paul says, and the God who chose Israel has now extended that chosenness to the whole world if they will accept Jesus Christ. So you can all become Jews by accepting Jesus Christ. That's basically the deal. Any attempts to put limits on God's loyalty, his fidelity to his own promises or to his love is not God. All right. Now, what happens when you accept the God of the Jews through Jesus Christ? I can tell you because I did as an older person. I was almost 50 when I was baptized. And I will tell you the biggest effect and the most instantaneous effect, aside from a sort of serenity that came over me, it was accompanied by a sudden lightning flash illumination of the fact that I had no virtue. Of all the things that I was proud of about myself were non-existent. All the things I thought, that Klavan, he's a great guy, they didn't exist. They were nothing. They were a fraud. Everything. And when you name a virtue, I didn't have it. And I'm not being sentimental about this. I'm not pretending that I'm a bad person. I'm an evil person. I'm not. I'm like the Rochester and Jane Eyre. I was made to be one of the better sort of men. I don't commit most of the, maybe I covet my neighbor's ram or whatever from time to time, but that's, mostly I don't break the 10 Commandments. But the things that you think you are, honest, courageous, and having integrity, forget it. When you accept God, you suddenly see in this lightning flash of holy light, no, none of those things. I am an enemy of God by nature. My broken nature is an enemy of God. Jesus Christ, and I think this is pretty, basic Christianity, was crucified not because the Jews reject God, but because Adam and Eve rejected God. This is what Paul tells us, right? It was Adam and Eve's rejection of God that had to be paid for, and their descendants, which is all of us. We all reject God. We all are guilty of the crucifixion. And that sense of our own virtuelessness, our own wickedness, our own hostility toward God is hard to bear, especially if you're one of these guys who's always shouting, how great you are and how great your race is and how great the color of your skin is and how much better that, your country is than other people. If you're one of these people, it's very hard to say, oh, you know what? We all kind of suck. We all, and me, not just we all suck, but me, my virtue is an illusion. The things that I like, because that's why they have all those bigotries, is because they're trying to prop themselves up. And so instead of saying, yes, we all are guilty of the crucifixion, they put it on the Jews. And this became a European culture of Jew hatred, which echoed because now everybody had joined in this worship of the Jewish God. It echoed the crucifixion. It wasn't as bad as the crucifixion because nothing can be as bad as the crucifixion, but it echoed the crucifixion. It was the shadow side of Christianity. It was the opposite of the saints. It was people who took on Christianity as if it were a team, as if they were joining the Yankees, and now I can cheer because I've got a cross around my neck, which is why I wear mine under my shirt, not on top of my shirt. It's like they look at it as a team. Yay, we're the Christians, and we get to kill this one and that one because they're not the Christians. But they weren't actually accepting God, who tells you, you know what, you suck, you better love people and not judge them, because the judgment that you judge by will be the judgment by which you are judged, right? And so when Europe died, and Europe is dead, it's been dead since 1945. It died in that conflagration that went from World War I to World War II. That great society that existed from around 1500 to about 1914 is gone, and it died in this explosion of Jew hatred, which was the shadow side of Christianity winning out over Christianity itself. I once said the Holocaust was the crucifixion replayed on IMAX, and what I didn't mean by that was that it was bigger or more important than the crucifixion or worse than the crucifixion. I've already said, no, the crucifixion is the worst thing in human history, but it was just played out not in some obscure Roman, fiefdom. It was played out on the greatest civilization mankind has ever had. Europe, the civilization of Europe from 1500 to 1914, greatest civilization human beings have ever produced. And when it went down in this absolutely, paroxysm of murder of Jews, specifically Jews. So listen, I'm still pulling for JD. I don't want to pick on him, but it does matter, because once you stop blaming other people for their sins and accept your own, you will find that is exactly what Jesus was talking about when he said, you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. This week, almost the entire country got hit with an Arctic blast, which is never fun unless you are trapped inside looking for something to watch, and suddenly there is the Pendragon Cycle, Rise of the Merlin, dropping on DailyWire Plus. Episodes 1 and 2 are out already, and we love what fans are saying about it. We also love the comments from people who hate us, like, quote, I hate that I have to give the Daily Wire money to watch this, which honestly feels like a win to us. And today, episode 3 of the Pendragon Cycle is available. So if you are not a member, this is the time to fix that. Go to DailyWirePlus.com to start watching. You can also get the Pendragon Pass, which gives you 3 months of Daily Wire Plus, including 1 month free, so you can watch the entire 7-episode series as it releases. And it automatically enters you to win a trip for 2 to Budapest, one of the main filming locations of the Pendragon Cycle. Go to DailyWirePlus.com to join now. By the way, if you'd like to react to that last segment, I'll give you my producer Tom's home address, and you can send your complaints to him. Meanwhile, it's time for Klavan Klapbacks.
Many of us grew up reading that story of Anne Frank. Somebody's going to write that children's story about Minnesota.
Don't speak. No, go.
I'll say. All right, Klavan Klapbacks, Klavan with a K, Klapbacks with a K at dailywire.com. Write to us. We love to hear from you, and I read a lot more of the letters than I get to answer, but I will answer as many as I can. You can ask about anything you want. Here is one from Cole. He says, Dear Wise Klavanator, as a Christian artist, I devour your segments on arts and entertainment like life devastating elixir. However, I'm sometimes confused as you seem to hold conflicting opinions on explicit content in art. While you acknowledge the 19th century is the height of the novel and 1939 is the peak year for film, you often criticize some modern art, including Christian entertainment, for eschewing more explicit depictions of elements such as sex. I argue that restraints like Victorian propriety and the Hays Code help produce some of the greatest works in history, while the proliferation of explicit content in the name of realism has only aided in eroding the consumer's mind and spirit. Have I misunderstood your position? If not, please dispel my erroneous notions with your signature wit and gravitas. Thank you for being the voice for conservative Christian artists. Yeah, you kind of do misunderstand what I'm saying. Any block that you put in the way of an artist will improve his work. If I tell you have to write your poems as sonnets, you'll become a better poet. And so with the Hays Code, by making it almost impossible to write about the things that adults do, like have sex, made people more creative about depicting sex. And the Victorian propriety, I think, was the same, although at the same time the British were writing their brilliant Victorian novels, the French were writing Victorian novels that were very explicit in many ways. So that was really a difference between the French and the British. I, too, prefer the British, however. So restrictions always help the art. They give it form and all that, but it doesn't have to be moral restrictions, and that's why I think the Hays Code worked so well. However, I also believe that almost every sex scene and nude scene is unnecessary. And the reason I believe that is because watching sex and having sex are almost two opposite things. Watching people have sex and living through the experience of sex are not the same thing at all, and you cannot communicate one by showing the other. So I'm mostly against, but I've seen some sex scenes that work. I have seen some sex scenes that actually communicated something. I have some in my books that I absolutely would not take out because they tell you something. My problem with Christian art is not that it's clean. My problem with Christian art is that it's simplistic. It's that it tells you that prayer always works. It tells you that everything is comforting, and if you believe, you'll be saved, and all your problems will be solved. It does not show life as it is, unless it's the Christian art of guys like Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, and then it shows you reality. That's my problem with it. It's not that it's not explicitly sexual. Michael, dear Mr. Klavan, I'm 25 years old, recently married, and have long planned on building a family, but I'm paralyzed by the thought of my children ending up in hell. Most Christians I know believe that hell includes unending, unbearable, inescapable torment. Since I cannot control a child's decisions, I get the sickening feeling that having kids is a tremendously irresponsible gamble. Every evil person was once an innocent child, and this thought makes it difficult to have the children I desire. I can believe that eternal life outweighs finite suffering, but I can't imagine how it outweighs eternal suffering. This is especially true if I experience the eternal life and my child experiences the eternal suffering. Somewhere in my heart, I suspect I'm confused and probably wrong. Please help me understand why. Thank you so much for the work you do. It has blessed me tremendously over the last several years. Well, first of all, I just would like to point out that the very first thing God says to mankind is be fruitful and multiply. So obviously God has a different plan than you have. Now the second thing he says is don't eat the forbidden fruit, and that's what Adam and Eve do almost immediately. So at least you're a normal human being in that you find it hard to follow simple instructions. So here's the thing, Christianity, as beautiful a religion as it is, in its normal form, doesn't scratch the surface of God's love. It does not scratch the surface of God's love. I think about this all the time because I feel like I don't scratch the surface of God's love. The rules that we put on things, the rules that we put on judgment, the judgments we pass on one another are our judgments, and they are to God not even a speck of dust in his eye. The love that he has for mankind, that he expressed in his own suffering and death to save us, is enormous. It's beyond our imagining. Don't worry about your kids. Your kids will be fine. Raise them with love. They'll be fine, really. And follow God's instructions. Be fruitful and multiply. He told you to do it, so do it. Simple. That's the simplest answer I can give you. He told you to do it, so do it. And get to work immediately because we need them. All right, we're going to go into the member block, which means those of you who are not members will be plunged into a darkness indescribable. I won't even try to describe it. I'll just tell you, a tear will just course down my cheek in my pity for what's about to happen to you. You could prevent it, though, by going to Member Block and becoming a member today. Go to dailywire.com/subscribe and use code Klavan at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans, or suffer eternal darkness.
was it like, Merlin, to be alone with God?
Is that who you think I was alone with?
Merlin, I knew your father. I am yet convinced that he was not of this world.
All men know of the great Taliesin.
Who am I, Father, that the gods should war for my soul?
Princess Garrus, savior of our people.
I know what the bull god offered you. I was offered the same.
And?
There is a new power at work in the world. I've seen it. A god who sacrifices what he loves for us.
We are each given only one life, Singer.
No. We're given another. I learned of Yezu the Christ, and I have become his follower.
He's waiting on a miracle, and I think you can give him one.
Trust in Yezu. He is the only hope for men like us.
Fate of Britain never rests in the hands of the great light.
Great light, great darkness. Such things mattered to me then.
What matters to you now, Mistress of Lies?
You, nephew.
The sword of a high king.
How many lives must be lost before you accept the power you were born to wield? So clinging to the promises of a god who has abandoned you.
I cannot take up that sword again.
You know what you must do.
Great light, forgive me.
The time has come to be reborn.